it's difficult to describe how many synergistic things are happening right now at the administration. It's all of the things that you hope would happen. In fact, there's a meeting every single week where we all get together within the Office of Infrastructure and we talk about opportunities and obstacles. And I think that's exactly what you want your government to do.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Bright Lights. I am so excited today. We've got an amazing guest. This will actually be the end of season 1, so we'll have one more recap episode, but we've had some great guests leading up to this one, and this is really somebody that I'm super, super excited about. As we have in our last 2 episodes, we've got our co-host, Mike Stacey from KPMG. So first and foremost, Mike, welcome back to co-hosting here at Bright Lights.
Thanks, Rick. Super excited for part 3.
Yeah, and so today's topic is really, how is the federal government implementing new tech in its buildings? And you are a great person to be co-hosting with me today because you actually had a startup before you were at KPMG, and that's actually one of the ways that I was able to meet you. So tell us a little bit about that startup, but tell us also about your background in building efficiency.
Yeah, absolutely. So lived in this world and really excited for this episode because it is personal for me. So my startup, we had a technology that allowed any window to go clear to dark. So benefits of that are privacy, glare, and energy efficiency for buildings. So this was something that we integrated into window products, and I called on building owners. I called on everyone in that value chain to explore this, work with the federal government on different grant programs. And it was such a learning experience in terms of truly understanding how do building owners think, how do they integrate technologies in, how do they buy, and really, how does my technology stack up against everything else that building owners are looking at? And that can be HVAC, that can be other energy efficiency retrofits, it can be LED lighting. So I learned a ton from that experience. I was told no a lot, and that's the common flight of the entrepreneur. But I learned a ton from that experience. For me, why I'm so excited about this episode, it's amazing to see what the federal government is doing in this area. They are a market mover in the world of energy efficiency and in buildings. And I wish that some of those market moves might have been 10 years ago when I was in the entrepreneurial game. But for me, this is personally a thrill to see what's happening, and here to learn a lot more today from our guest.
Yeah, and even I wanted to give it a shout out. You actually were in one of the early cohorts of a program that we're happy to be a part of, IN2, which is the program with Wells Fargo and the National Renewable Energy Lab. So shout out to IN2 and all the great things that they do as well. So
yeah, absolutely. I think organizations, entrepreneurs can't survive. Many of us can't survive without organizations like that, and the boost that those groups make is super critical.
Yeah. Well, I am so excited, like I said, for today. And I know I've said that a couple of times. We are super blessed to have Anna Siefken joining us. She's the Deputy Director for the FEMP program at Department of Energy. But she's somebody that, frankly, has been a mentor to me for the last several years as I've been trying to navigate the energy space back when she was at Carnegie Mellon and the work that she did there. And so just being able to have Anna as somebody that I've bounced ideas off for the last 6 or 7 years has been amazing, but I'm excited even more so to bring her knowledge, her expertise, and the programs that she's running to Bright Lights to give our audience a little bit of a snapshot into what's going on in the federal government. So without further ado, welcome Anna Siefken to Bright Lights.
It's great to be here. Good to see you both.
Yeah, well, Anna, like I said, it's been awesome getting to know you over the last couple of years and all the amazing work that you've been doing. So thanks so much for taking time out of your amazingly busy schedule to be a part of Bright and to be a part of this program.
Well, I mean, I've always been a big fan of your work, and I think it's really important that we have incubators around the country that are doing this important work. So I appreciate you, and I appreciate the work that you're doing. I'm glad to be here today.
Awesome. Well, let's dig in. I think every episode I always start kind of with the same two questions. And I've learned it really helps kind of set some guardrails, but also gets what's top of mind for our guests when they're coming on here. And so when it comes to this building efficiency and implementing new tech, what excites you about that space right now?
Well, it's wide open. I think that's the thing that I like the most. So we're at this critical juncture in history when we have a supportive administration, where we have funding that's available. We have opportunities abound in terms of what we can actually accomplish. And so it's like we have everything sort of lining up. We have startups who are engaged. We have incubators who have support. We have great people out there with incredible ideas. I just think that we're at this, it really is an inflection point where we have this opportunity to really, really take advantage of everything that's out there, be it funding or all of these different mechanisms, these ecosystems around the country, around the world, really. I mean, this is a global issue we have with climate change. And so that's the part that I find the very most exciting. I know what your next question is going to be, which is what scares me the most, right? Which is the flip side of that coin. So the flip side is we don't take advantage of this moment, that we don't get everything done, that we don't mitigate the worst impacts of climate change, that we don't take advantage of incredible funding opportunities, that we don't have programs that land in communities that have been disproportionately impacted by energy generation over the past X number of years. I just feel like there are a lot of things that if we don't quite do it right, we really might miss. So I think that that actually is what scares me the most, is that we can't get to everything and we're not moving fast enough. So
yeah, I mean, opportunity abounds, and it is unbelievably exciting. But it's a point in time that we're all going to, I think, remember, and hopefully we're going to be good ancestors so our kids remember the actions that were took, in the early years of the 2000s, if you will. I guess we're a quarter of the way into the century now, aren't we?
Yeah, we are. There's so many activities that need to happen between now and 2030, 2035, 2050 in order to really mitigate the worst impacts of climate change. And energy is at the center point of everything. And so it is a really exciting time.
Awesome.
Anna, could you maybe talk a little bit about the mission of DOE's Federal Energy Management Program? I think our listeners would love to hear about that. Absolutely.
So FEMP is the Federal Energy Management Program. It historically has been in the EERE, which a lot of people know, the energy efficiency, renewable energy part of the Department of Energy. Mm-hmm. But interestingly enough, FEMP has been around for 50 years. So we're older than the DOE itself. And our mission is to help the country's largest consumer of energy, which is the federal government, to meet all of the goals related to facilities, fleet, energy, water, throughout all stages of energy management. And so we do that in a number of ways. We do it through policy and planning. So we analyze all of these energy mandates that have come out. We help agencies plan to meet those legislative goals, and I'll talk a little bit about those. We do analysis and strategy. So we work alongside all of the agencies, there's 26 of them, to identify short and long-term opportunities to cut costs and save energy and meet these goals. So we have execution and funding, where we offer funding opportunities, particularly things like performance contracting support. Mm-hmm. We have an entire team that focuses on optimization and maintenance. So we provide resources to ensure that facilities and fleet are actually at their optimal state. And then we also have results and recognition. So we award the best of the best. So we find ways and opportunities to actually guide data reporting, and we use that information to showcase the significant energy and water savings contributions that these different agencies are going to make. So FEMP, I mentioned that we support, 50 years old. We've been around for a long time. We're now in the Office of Infrastructure. I can talk a little bit about that. But the portfolio that we touch is about 350,000 buildings, 600,000 cars and trucks, right? So there's a huge opportunity there. It's about 3 billion gross square feet.
Wow. Off by a couple
The
billion.
opportunity is really huge. So again, we work with the White House, federal agencies, Congress, industry is a huge player, the national labs, and sort of the MUSH market, which is municipalities, universities, schools, and hospitals, to facilitate public-private partnerships and provide energy leadership, really to drive the entire country, right? Because when you have a portfolio of that size and you're trying to help with trainings and providing grant funding and tracking agency success, you really sort of get towards the White House goals, which are pretty ambitious.
Wow, that's an amazing scope, an amazing charter. What would you say some of the accelerators of your mission are?
Well, there are actually four of them that really, really are driving us. And they're all sort of federal mandates. So even though the SEC sort of measures some things and different parts of the federal government are monitored, and commercial buildings have benchmarking legislation, et cetera, at the state and local level, we have executive orders that we follow. So the first one is actually the Energy Act of 2020. So in that, agencies are supposed to be using performance contracting. And I'll talk a lot about performance contracting in terms of opportunity. For at least 50% of the energy conservation measures, I'll start using acronyms now, the ECMs that are identified for implementation. The second one is actually really the big one, which is an executive order. It's 14057 for those of us who are tracking, which requires 100% net zero buildings, a zero emission fleet, 24/7 carbon pollution-free electricity, and net zero federal operations by 2050. So that goalpost that I was talking about. Yeah. So the third is called the Climate Smart Building Initiative, which has agencies, these federal agencies, establishing emission reduction targets delivered through performance contracting, which is a great way to sort of finance a lot of these projects, while increasing on-site electricity generation. A huge part of what we do is trying to encourage emission-free electricity generation. And the third is actually interesting. It's somewhat related to what's happening in commercial buildings, but we have a federal building performance standard, which sets a goal of zero Scope 1 emissions from on-site fossil fuels use in 30% of the portfolio, again, by 2030. So there's a lot of incentives that we have that are driving the performance metrics. So we end up providing, again, technical assistance, training, funding, tools, and interagency partnerships with communities, and try to really focus on best practices and lessons learned. And we do it through a lot of performance contracting, sharing of success stories. But it is a very ambitious set of goals.
I feel like between last episode with Jetta Wong and this episode with you, I'm saying wow a lot. Like, wow, the breadth of the work, but also the depth of impact that is in line with y'all's roles is amazing. And I'm very grateful that the president has selected people as talented as you and as talented as Jetta to be in these roles. So, my next question here really is, what specifically are you doing to have the government lead by example in this space? So what are you working on?
So, well, the first thing I want to give you just a couple of highlights, because you were saying wow, so I was just going to wow you a little bit more.
It's going to wow me all the way out the door.
I know.
Right?
We have about $16 billion in project investments that have been awarded. We're estimating that in terms of energy savings, it's about 63.8 trillion BTUs reduced annually. The economic sort of drivers in terms of like workforce development, we've developed about 128,000 jobs. And our environmental impact is estimated at 3.6 million metric tons of CO2 reduced annually. So impact is huge. And so what I work on is everything that I can associated with that. So I support our director, Mary Sotos, in sort of the strategic direction of the entire organization. So how do we put together partnerships? How do we measure funding? How do we find the policy levers that we can work with and activate them? And so I would say most importantly, we have been tracking energy use. And so I can report that we've saved 50% of our electricity load for the federal government since we started tracking in 1975. So that's over half a century. We've helped federal agencies with these bold energy and water savings goals. And we've set standards exactly like you said, by leading by example. So with clean energy, it's not an easy task, particularly because we are this huge portfolio. And so most recently, I'm proud to actually announce that FEMP is delivering on Congress's mandate to cut emissions from federal buildings with the finalization of the clean energy for new buildings and major renovations for federal buildings rule. That's a mouthful. We call it the clean energy rule, clean energy buildings rule.
Yeah.
So in 2007, 15 years ago, we were called upon to tell and work with all agencies to phase out the use of fossil fuels in federal buildings and construction projects. And so this will start with a 90% reduction in fossil fuels for use in projects started between 2025 and 2029. And beginning in 2030, the rule is going to call for complete elimination of on-site fossil fuels in federal building projects. So in order to do that, it goes back to what our mission is. We are conducting trainings. So we're bringing some together this summer so that federal agencies can actually learn more about how to do these energy conservation measures, like what can they do. We're offering funding, and we have about $250 million still left in a program that we call AFFECT, and I'm going to talk a little bit more of that, of which we have a second phase open. So right now, agencies are working hard to pull together applications for us due on June 27th.
Yep.
And then we provide technical assistance, and we pull together working groups and forums so that we can support the efforts that they have. So that is actually really huge, this clean energy rule, to move the entire portfolio as fast as we can away from or towards emission-free electricity.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I got to say too, I was fortunate enough to attend the Energy Exchange conference, and what an amazing just education on what's happening and all the opportunities out there, but learning from industry and folks that are part of the government, all coming together. Honestly, it's one of the best conferences that I've been to. And so thanks so much.
We deliver somewhere between 50 and 60,000 hours of technical training with CEUs. So these are accredited professionals working in federal procurement jobs. That particular conference had about 2,900 attendees. And they were all there for the exact same purpose, which is how can we take these existing buildings and any new buildings that might come up in this enormous portfolio, and how can we make them more energy and water efficient? How can we reduce the emissions by using CFE, carbon pollution free electricity, CFE. So it's at the core of our mission. And so that's a really great conference. We're really excited to be doing it for the 8th year next year in Anaheim.
That's awesome. So leaning towards the private sector, what examples have you seen in the private sector of maybe companies that are looking to you from the federal government and then actually doing the work on their own or alongside of you in the private sector? So what are some of those companies or projects that you're seeing out there that the private sector is adopting?
Well, one of the best ways that private sector gets involved with FEMP is through performance contracting. And so what that means is they're forming public-private partnerships, partnerships with us, but then also working with and for the federal agencies through contracting vehicles to use third-party financing to support the projects. So if you think about it, through performance contracts and utility energy service contracts. So utilities are really interested in supporting this because then they don't have, if there's energy efficiency in a federal building, then that particular power plant doesn't have to increase its capacity to handle a different peak load, right? So they can actually not create additional generation. They can use that generation for other uses. So utilities are very interested in the work that we do. And commercial buildings can follow in similar pathways by, again, energy conservation measures, thinking through what are the priorities that they have, what kinds of investments can they make now that will save them over the long run. This is all an investment game, right? It's all about how do we take the money that we have now, either through appropriations, which is how the federal government would do it, or through private investment or equity or however one might do it. How do you use the money now to make the investment, and then it pays dividends over time through energy savings, and then that savings can be used for other things. So industry gets involved because they're at every part of the supply chain, right?
Yeah.
They're at the electricity generation part. They're creating batteries and solar panels that the federal government is interested in purchasing. There's obviously huge procurement and supply chain related issues. And a lot of that is why we got moved into the Department of Infrastructure, which is a new part of the DOE, right? It was, as a part of Bill, we were given about $63 billion to implement hundreds of programs. And so they put us all into this Office of Infrastructure, which also includes manufacturing and energy supply chain, LPO. A lot of people know Jigger Shaw. The Grid Deployment Office, the state and community energy programs, right? So we're all working together, engaging with industry, engaging with partners, and finding ways to implement these projects as quickly and efficiently as possible.
Yeah.
Anna, maybe if I could drill into that a little bit, being in the Office of Infrastructure, you talked a bit about buildings, but for lack of a pun, how are you also leading the charge in vehicle fleets?
Well, we are working. So I don't work specifically on fleet optimization, and there are a lot of folks on our team that do. So I'll start from that point. We are very interested in making sure that our fleets are electric. And so as the fleets are turning over, we provide incentives and technical assistance to help people understand not only the fleet itself, so the vehicle, but also the charging system. So EVSE, the supply equipment, right? And so we also have a vested interest in like VPPs, like how can a building actually carry the load, and the vehicle supports that. We also have to think about someone who, the Postal Service, great opportunity, how many vehicles? I don't remember the number.
A lot.
Thousands and thousands of vehicles.
The largest fleet in the world, I think.
Largest fleet in the world, right? And they're in the process of, thinking through when do you charge? How do you charge? How do you quickly charge? What about when someone goes home? Do they go and they park their vehicle and then jump in their ice and drive home? It's like there's all kinds of ways that we're trying to incentivize this carbon-free electricity, carbon pollution-free electricity, so that when they are drawing down in the charging stations, they are using cleaner sources. But then we're also trying to think through all of the different modalities, right? I heard a story recently about, employees who need to drive that vehicle home, because then we actually have to think through what's the charging opportunity they have at their house. And so it's like an entire sort of shift in the way that we think about vehicles, particularly with a fleet of this size. The other part is really just infrastructure overall, right? It's like, how do we make sure we have all of the charging infrastructure in all of the places where people will need it? So it's available to federal government employees, at work, at home, consumers. There's a whole platform. And so that's a combination of different parts of the Office of Infrastructure that are looking at that. And they're partnering with the Vehicle Technology Office. They're partnering. So there's it's difficult to describe how many synergistic things are happening right now at the administration. It's all of the things that you hope would happen. In fact, there's a meeting every single week where we all get together within the Office of Infrastructure and we talk about opportunities and obstacles. And I think that's exactly what you want your government to do. But like I said, the vehicle charging part of it is like one piece of this enormous pie, but a really, really important one.
And I do want to throw a plug out there for Irina Filipova of Electrata. One of our startup companies was talking about how they're addressing fleet optimization and really their programs and their systems too.
And I maybe wanted to just drill down into that sea of opportunities you mentioned. How do you evaluate and prioritize those? Because it sounds like tremendous goals and even tremendous progress. But as you break down these opportunities within buildings and fleet, how does FEMP prioritize and thinking about economics, thinking about carbon reduction? What do those meetings look like?
Well, it's an enormous opportunity is what it is. And so we're finding that on average about 967 million new energy conservation measures are identified by the agencies every single year. So we have this huge opportunity. Wow. Yeah, I mean, it's they're reporting through energy audit data that they found $2.9 billion through facility evaluations just in 3 years through December of 2020. Obviously, that was a little while ago. But the point of the matter is that there's this there's the enormity of what I'll call the backlog or the deferred maintenance. It's really huge. And so prioritization comes down to data and trying to make key decisions. And so a lot of what we focus on through our programs is on emissions reduction. Like, how do we get to net zero? How do we get closer to net zero? Mm-hmm. And so when you use that lens, and we have a program that's called eProject Builder, where, it's like all of these different data points that an agency would put together as a part of an application to us, then we will really see which energy conservation measures are going to have the biggest impact as the soonest. When third-party financing is available, we also have like investment tax credits, and we have all these other mechanisms that third-party financing is using. Who owns the equipment? GSA, for example, they don't own, they lease a lot of space. So they have to make decisions based on what their portfolio looks like overall, and then on a building by building basis. And that part gets really hard because, your priority is the work of your agency, delivering mail, or energy conservation measures, right? And so what we try to do is provide them with the information that they need to get the payback. And then, through things like performance contracting, we can actually, because someone uses appropriations to do a project, it's like they pay for it and it's done. Whereas if they use a performance contract, it actually spreads out the cost over time. And that's easier in most cases for the federal government to kind of absorb. So we see a lot of estimated cost savings. We see a lot of detail coming across to us in terms of how people are benchmarking and what kind of performance they are seeing.
Yeah, no, that's awesome too. So I want to jump back to something you briefly mentioned earlier, but I want to bring that back to the top. So the AFFECT program. It sounds awesome. You guys had 250 million, I believe, in BIL funding for that. So what are the goals for AFFECT, and how can companies get involved? And we will also make sure we put a link in the liner notes on where to go.
Well, so the AFFECT is open for federal agencies. So that's the first part, is that we are the only sort of facing the federal government part of the Department of Infrastructure. So everyone else is actually working more outward. We are working directly with all of these agencies to help them with these decisions. So AFFECT stands for Assisting Federal Facilities with Energy Conservation Technologies, AFFECT. So we've been running this program since 2014, kind of at a lower funding level, just chugging along, making some great improvements. Somewhere around 70 or 80 projects had been selected. and then bill came out, right? So $250 million that we were using specifically to drive buildings towards net zero targets. So January of this past year, we announced the disbursement of the first 104 million of it. It went to energy conservation measures at 31 different facilities, 18 states. And so these projects are all expected to double the amount of carbon-free electricity capacity at federal facilities over the amount brought online in 2022. So huge, right? So the projects go even further because they're leveraging about $361 million in private investment. So you've got the funding that came in from us, but then there's all this other funding and all of the other work that I talked about in terms of you need a workforce to do that. You need a performance contracting company that has a supply chain implication. You need manufactured goods. So all of that starts to be activated by this program. So we're in the second phase of what we're calling bill, affect bill specifically. And so we have new selections that are coming. In fact, it's an open window right now. People are working on their applications, and they are due in June of 2024. And so as a whole, like I said, we have all of this funding that we're trying to get out. And so this program is actually a way that people can really kind of activate their funding mechanisms. And we're seeing ideas across the board. Yeah. One thing that's interesting, though, is that they're all tried and true technologies, right? Yeah. Because when you have this additional funding, like these funding mechanisms, and you need to show your ROI within a particular window, you're not trying the bleeding edge technologies. You're using tried and true. So we see a lot of
that's really where we live.
That's right. We use a lot of we see a lot of solar. We see a lot of building integration systems. We see geothermal, but we're always interested in finding ways that new technologies could be implemented if they meet the risk profile. But interesting, there are ways that technologies can meet the profile that we can use. One of them is the GSA's Green Proving Ground. Yeah. So they actually have a program. You guys are well aware of it. Last episode, right? Yep. Where they're using the real estate portfolio of the GSA to test out innovative building technologies. And so we lean in on some of those, partner with them, talk with them about how to implement those technologies. And that way we're being the best stewards of taxpayer dollars, because that's what a lot of this comes down to, right? This is not private capital. This is federal taxpayer money. And we want to be the best stewards of that we can. So DoD has a similar type program that does technology testing. Lots of acronyms, the Strategic Environmental Research and Development Program. And they have another one called the Environmental Security Technology Certification Program, SERDP and ESTCP. Different programs that people can use.
Yeah. Anna, could we talk a little bit about some of these older buildings and retrofits? Do you have a top 5 list of energy efficiency retrofits for older buildings?
Well, the thing that we all know, giant elephant in the room, is that every building is completely different from every other building.
Ours was made in 1907.
It's true. Just like every house has a different set of systems, a different set of requirements, a different set of users, a different style of use. Every building is different. So I kind of hesitate on picking a top 5. I mean, I have top 5 favorites, right? But what we are seeing is that people, when they're focused on the investment and they're focused on emissions reduction, they're making decisions that are actually helping them reach somewhere between 50% conservation. Like they really are driving down through these technologies. So we see kind of an overarching strategy around energy efficiency, water efficiency, considering electrification, and then downsizing systems and lowering electric costs. So a lot of the sort of on-site distributed energy and storage technologies, we're also seeing a lot of that on our sites. And then for electrification technologies. We see heat pumps. We see heat pump water heaters. We've seen a lot of sort of effective solutions with that. But then, distributed energy and water technologies. So I think that's the kind of thing that we're seeing the most of, is these sort of systems level approaches. Gone are the days of, lighting retrofits. Although occasionally we will see a really good lighting retrofit. And a lot of people are doing these with energy sales agreements, ESAs. So we're trying to find, again, different ways and mechanisms for people to use contracting vehicles for these different technologies. So when we look at affect specifically, we did see solar and geothermal. We saw a lot of the ones that you would think that we would see.
Yeah.
So top 5, really hard. Really depends on your building. Brutalist building, stone building, glass pane building. Do they need the glass film, the treatment that you had from your previous company? Shading, there's all sorts of things that we're seeing in these buildings.
Right.
I can tell you a dirty secret of mine. I love talking about window treatments. And I also like to make sure I call them window treatments so people know that I really know what I'm talking about when it comes to what we're putting over our windows. And I want to get into kind of our last question of the day. This has been amazing, by the way, and thanks so much for all the great knowledge on this. But what are some of the innovative ways that you look to improve government buildings, and how can the startups and even the larger corporates that are involved in BRITE's network get involved with the program?
Well, because the federal agencies are our sort of customers, they are always looking for great vendors. So they have a higher risk profile, again, because of the way that things are structured. But I would say that they are trying to find ways of testing technologies. Again, things like the Green Proving Ground, the ones from the DoD, those are testing grounds that I encourage folks to get involved with. Obviously, ARPA-E is a way that new technologies can be tested and piloted. And then, we're looking for technologies that are further along the technology readiness level scale, right? We need things that are fully commercialized in most cases.
Yep.
But that being said, we do find that buildings, a lot of our building operators at the local level are very interested in understanding what technologies are available to them. So every, building management systems, there isn't like a one system that fits everyone. And so those building systems, the building management systems at the local level, in many cases, there's different things that can kind of be tested and tried. But again, it's a bigger sort of machine in the way that we think about things.
Absolutely.
And our risk profile is pretty high. So corporations can get involved in the supply chain, right? Because this opportunity that we're trying to incentivize is huge. In fact, I've heard there are about 600 manufacturing plants coming up in the United States right now because of Bill and IRA, Chips and Science Act, right? So all of these Biden administration related different policies and levers are actually having their intended impact. We do have administrative support plus corporate engagement plus manufacturing and the supply chain reshoring to the United States. We have all of these different things that are coming together in ways that you can't not think about the opportunities that it would have at the local level in the supply chain. So I encourage companies that are coming up to get in touch with us, to get in touch with our colleagues, whether at ARPA-E or in other parts of the department, myself included. Please just contact me, reach out to me on LinkedIn, and we will find a way to sort of insert what you're working on, because we do receive pitches all the time. We receive people who are interested, and a lot of them we can't necessarily accept. Again, our risk profile is a little bit different.
Well,
but that doesn't mean there isn't a place for them within a different part of the department. Navigating the department is kind of a part of all of our jobs, is helping people land where they're supposed to. and finding and connecting the opportunities together.
Yeah. Well, and our role here at Bright is really getting those products to market faster so y'all can use them. So having an eye on the end result, I think is really, really important for our startups to have and understand, what the opportunities are that are there now, that maybe when their technology is at that TRL level 9, they have a great pathway for an amazing customer. So, wow. I think this should be titled "Wow." I mean, I don't know what else to say from that standpoint. What an amazing bit of insight into the FEMP program, 50 years old and still doing better work today than they've ever done before. I put that on the deputy director's leadership. So Anna, thanks so much for joining us here on BRITElights and all you've done for Bright over the years, and myself, grateful beyond belief for that. And Mike Stacey, thanks so much for co-hosting again. This is your 3rd episode, and you've been an amazing part of this. And thanks for KPMG lending you out to us for this. We're greatly appreciative of that. I know my kids would not. The last episode, they didn't hear me say like and subscribe. And as kids that watch YouTube from time to time, they're like, "Dad, what are you doing?" So I want to make sure that I tell you to smash that like and subscribe button on Spotify or wherever you're listening to this today. Any last words, Anna? Any last words, Mike?
Anna, thank you. This is, I learned a lot. It's super encouraging as a recovering entrepreneur to see these things in play. I think there's a lot of promise ahead.
Well, my last comment is get involved. So anyone who's out there who's interested in the clean energy economy, we have so much work to do. We don't just need the technical experts. We don't just need the PhDs. We need everyone. In fact, we need thousands of workers are going to be needed in these spots. There are hundreds of jobs available at the DOE and in other companies. If you see, there are many, many jobs that are available. And so I just encourage people to not only look for some of these specifically clean energy jobs that are available, because we are building this workforce of the future, but to really consider where you are and think about the procurement opportunities that you have in your current company. Like, how can you influence the sustainability measures that are happening where you are, and take advantage of that too. So there's a lot that can be done. It is a collective effort, and I think there's room for everyone.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And as we always say on the outro of this, we'll catch you on the bright side.